Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. All right. Hey guys. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. I met a lot of you on the entrance. I'm Justin. I'm the coordinator for the IGDA Orange County chapter. We wanted to just thank you again for showing up to these meetings. We'll be having them monthly with a whole bunch of interesting talks like the one we're about to hear from Mark. So we wanted to once again thank Gaikai for hosting this event for us. Yeah. Um, and Rain over here has been instrumental in all the stuff we've been doing here. So once again, a big thanks to Rain. So with that, I'm going to let Mark introduce himself, and thank you guys again.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? Awesome. Excellent. There's a $5 bill under all the chairs for all the clapping. So if you guys want to take advantage of that, that's cool. Whoa! Wait, what happened here? It just got really small. All right, there we go. Woo! I have a mouse, and it's going to be touching my leg a few times, so keep the snickering down. All right, well, let's just go ahead and get started. I'll kind of introduce myself here. Let's just advance. So yes, my name is Mark Sodawal, and I've been in the gaming industry for over 20 years. Basically got right into doing Nintendo games right out of high school. So won an art competition at a local event, actually in Orange County, and one of the judges on the panel happened to be doing Nintendo games at a small studio, called me up a couple days later and said, "Hey, you want to do some video game work for us?" And I said, "Sure, I have no idea how to do that." He's like, "It's okay, we'll teach you." I've never heard of a studio say that ever in my career. It's just like, yeah, come in, we'll pay you, and we'll help you learn, how to do this stuff. So anyways, and I've got over 40 published titles, and I've worked for AAA studios like LucasArts and Atari, EA. Back in the day, worked at Emergent Interactive Entertainment. Actually worked with David Perry for a few years there as well, and that was a really great experience. So what we're going to talk about tonight is, even though the subject is indie, I'm going to be also kind of peppering in a lot of my AAA experience at those studios. And kind of what I'm going to do is kind of show a marriage of how, even though they're different worlds, there are a lot of methodologies, there's a lot of practices that are similar, that are cross-compatible between both indie and AAA. So it's going to be kind of an interesting adventure that we're going to go on. Okay, we ready? All right, let's have at it. Touching myself, that's not good. All right. All right, so a couple of the AAAs that I've worked on, pretty well-known IPs to most. There have been areas of the planet that I've gone where people have not heard of Star Wars, and I'm always taken back by that, because it's just something that I'm sure most of us have grown up with. I've had the underwear, the bed sheets, the pillowcases, the action figures that I set up in the backyard, and I put the camera down really low to make the AT-AT really tall, and I burned my action figures, and yeah, it was really cool. So wow, there we go again. This mouse is really sensitive. Anyhow, so art directed in an external capacity on these titles, and basically what that means is that LucasArts, for a majority of their titles, had a lot of this stuff done off-site, and most of it was actually in England. In fact, there was one year at LucasArts that I did close to about 85,000 miles worth of travel back and forth to England, Australia, Scandinavia. I went into my executive producer and I asked him if I can expense marriage counseling, because it was really, really hard. It was very, very tough. Great project, The Force Unleashed. It was awesome, but it was a nightmare. We were working with a brand new engine that basically Lucas came in and said, "Look, I'm tired of spending money on all this technology. Is there anything that we have here between ILM, which was connected to the Sky Bridge to LucasArts, and I forget what that place was called, up in San Francisco." And he's like, "Is there anything over there that we can use for the next gen?" It was by way of an engine. And so we went over there, and the programmers, they sat down with the other gearheads, and they started talking. They're like, yeah, well, let's take one of the rendering engines, from Pirates of the Caribbean or Transformers. I can't remember what it was. And it's like, yeah, sure, we can make that work for a 360 and a PS3. Sure, no problem. So it was like, by the time all was said and done, we basically took a Ferrari and turned it into like a Datsun. I mean, it was just, we had to strip the guts out of this thing. And not only that, but we were really pushing a lot of innovation by way of putting in digital and molecular matter in order to make the physics respond right to different materials. We used euphoria and I can't remember what the other acronym was, but basically we had a lot of pieces of technology praying that they would be friends with each other, and of course they weren't. And so there was a lot of iteration. There was a lot of having to go back and work on assets and pieces and redesign, and it was an adventure. And then we had Fracture, and I don't know if anybody really remembers that game, but it was kind of a third-person game, a shooter game that actually, well, I'll touch on that later on the slides, but basically it was the mechanic was that you could actually deform the terrain to get tactical advantage. So you're able to either bread loaf the environment up or create big holes and depressions to drop the floor out from underneath, enemies, and do tunneling and raise up big spikes and stuff like that for puzzles. And it was a really cool mechanic. Of course, everybody knows Lego, and that was great working with that studio, because that's all they do is eat, sleep, and breathe Lego. They were like the easiest developer to work for. I mean, I would just go over there, I'd check in the studio, then I'd go to a pub. Because it was just like, you guys are doing great, no problem. Your art looks fantastic. You guys just, Lego inside and out. And Clone Wars was actually a lot of fun, because they were doing the actual animation film over at Skywalker Ranch. And so I got a lot of opportunity to go over there and talk with David Filioni, who's the director of the Clone Wars series, and got to sit down with a lot of their artists and a lot of their engineers, and how they did their shaders, how they did their lighting, their texturing, which was just awesome. Has anybody ever seen any of the 3D Clone Wars shows and stuff? It's really cool. I mean, you see the relief on the textures. They don't try and make it all clean. And so we spent a lot of time over at Skywalker Ranch because we wanted to try and get as close as we could to that visual inside the game. Even though it was on the Wii, we tried our darndest to make it, at least somewhat one-to-one. We weren't able to realize all the shaders, but no, that was really great. And of course, Star Wars Battlefront 3, which never happened, but I dedicated about 18 months of my life on something only to watch it just kind of just fizzle and die and turn into vapor and walk away. That was really a difficult project in that sense, because we were trying to do a lot of innovation. Let me set up how some of the features worked in this game on one level load. Okay, if you're familiar with the old Battlefront series, it's like you could either fight on the ground or you could fight in space. Oh, is it too sensitive? What's going on? Oh, I had it in smooth mode. I'm so smooth. Oh, wood. I'm sorry. I'm seeing everybody's head do this, and I'm like, what is going on? The whole room is on a gimbal. This studio's rad, Rain. I want to work here. I can't code worth a spit. But anyways, so where was I? Okay, so imagine this. You load the game up. You're on Tatooine, or something like that. You're a Mos Eisley. You're a clone trooper, and you're running around, and you see a starfighter, a Jedi starfighter, a speeder, whatever. You go and you do a little battling on the ground. You hop in the starfighter. You start taking it up into the sky, and then you start doing strafing runs on the city, and you're blowing away bounty hunters and their factions and whatever. And then all of a sudden you look up into the sky and you see these silhouettes, and you're like, hey, I want to break the atmosphere and go into space and do some dogfighting. And so you do. You break the atmosphere, one level load. You break the atmosphere, and now you're dogfighting in space, against TIE fighters and what have you. And then you start cruising around. You see some of the Corvettes and the Corellian ships and the Star Destroyers, and you're like, hey, their landing bays are open. I think I'm going to just park my starfighter right there. So you do. So you go in, you hop out of your starfighter. Now you're battling on the deck of these ships. You work your way up to the bridge. You blow everybody away on the bridge, and then you take the turbo cannons of the Star Destroyer and point it down at the planet and start wasting everybody on the planet. So, I mean, it was really cool. So, I hope somebody makes that game. Yeah, I've been hearing mutterings, but you know, I'm too close to it. It's like, I don't know. It hurts my heart. So hopefully they do a good job. There's a lot of talent out there, and I'm sure the studio that's got it is going to do right by it. So that's some of my AAA. Now let me talk to you a little bit about some of the indie games that I've worked on. So this one right here is actually called Rush Brothers, and it just released on Steam, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of Audio Surf meets Super Meat Boy meets Insanely Twisted Shadow Planet. All right, that's the best way that I could describe it. I creative directed the project, and so we wanted to have really psychedelic backgrounds and really great foregrounds, you know, that the character's going to run on. But what we were finding is that there was a lot of conflict, you know, by way of just the foregrounds competing with the backgrounds. So playing Insanely Twisted Shadow Planet, I'm like, all right, Jason and I were just talking about this. I'm going to plagiarize. I'm going to plagiarize this thing, and we're going to make it all silhouette, and we're going to sprinkle in some cool light strobes and whatever. But the whole game is based that you can play your own MP3s or CDs, and like Audio Surf, the game will react to your music. The backgrounds will thump in time with the music, whether you're playing dubstep or whatever. The game mechanics, the platforms, the lasers, the spikes, different things will start to time themselves to the downbeats of the music. And that brought up a really interesting point concerning like balancing. Because it's like if somebody's playing Metallica and somebody else is playing Enya, who's going to win? Okay, so we actually had to go in, and the coders had to start kind of doing some you know, funky algorithms to kind of put some governs in the game. So it couldn't go too low, but it couldn't go too high. So, you know, we tried to find a sweet spot, and then it's just the mechanic kind of fizzled away. You can see it sometimes, you know. I'm actually kind of speaking bad about the game. It's a great game. Go in and check it out. It's actually really awesome. I think you'll... Here, let me get over here because the speakers weren't working, so... I'll show you a little bit of the gameplay. Hang on. Okay. Where's the applause? Come on, guys. I worked my butt off on that game. No, just joking. No, actually, we did work hard. Everybody that's in game development knows that you cry. Oh, hey now. Should come back. It's like the curse of the demo. You know, you play the game and you've got it all in the studio and everything's working great and everybody's happy and smiling. You take it to the publisher, you boot it up, and you're like, what's going on here? So, anyways, I was talking about Rush Brothers, and where was I going with that? Help me out. What was the last thing I just said? What was that? Hard work. Okay. Yes, it was. It was very hard work. But, we okay, Jason? I borrowed it. So anyways, real quick, how many are actually working at a developer right now professionally? Okay, awesome. How many are working at a developer that has a publisher? Yeah. How many are you actually doing indie games right now on your own? Fantastic. Okay, good. I am in good company. Wonderful. So what's kind of the popular indie engine that you guys are using right now? Is it Unity? Is it UDK? Is it Ouya? Has anybody tried that one yet? No? Unity? Yeah. You built your own. Okay. Wow. That's ambitious. What's that? Well, no, I wouldn't say that, but yeah, I mean it definitely does. Yeah, building technology from the ground up, especially as an indie, is really tough because as soon as you get into production, there's a whole mess of things that start to crop up that you weren't expecting. And so now you're having to battle that along with your proprietary technology and getting things to play nice with each other. And so that's one of the reasons why those that are starting out in indie development, I'm always encouraging them to just use something off the shelf. Start learning, start getting your feet wet. Start out with a simple concept. It doesn't have to be totally derivative, but at the same time, it's like when I talk to students, in their schooling and their classes, for their assignments, they're so ambitious and they're so hungry and they're so passionate that they want to realize something amazingly huge, and they set themselves up because they just don't have the time. A lot of them don't realize that when they start getting into, these high topology type of models or these different types of shaders, or they're having to put tons of assets in to make a scene, some of it will look great because they spent the time on it, but they spent too much time because they didn't take into account so the rest of the scene. So you have this horrible contrast, and everything just kind of falls apart. So one of the things that I like to say is the fact that everybody loves polish. Even if it's simple, if it's clean and it's polished, it's gonna look great. So try and think about setting yourself up for wins and victories. And the more that you start stepping into those wins and those victories, the easier it's going to be the next time that challenge comes, that you're able to, you're able to hit it and be confident that you're going to be able to do it. Really. Why didn't everybody gather around my, we'll do a little kumbaya. Is there a way that we can put your laptop up here? Because I can just download the presentation onto your laptop. Jason. The eternal optimist. I love it. He's like, oh, a challenge. I can do this. I can do this. Well, real quick, while we're waiting, I know it's a little early, but did anybody have any questions? Might as well just start getting it going. Yeah, there in the back. We developed in Unity. So yeah, again, how do we like working with 2D in Unity? It's okay. A lot of those assets that you saw were actually 3D. So I mean, it's like if you were to just take the camera and just 2.5D it a little bit, you'd see a lot of the foreground artwork we started utilizing, because a lot of those are tiled, so we started using a lot of prefabs in Unity, which saved us a lot of time than having to just try and individually change certain things with prefabs. It was great. It's like instancing. So it's like you change one object, it's slave to the others and child, and so it made the production go a lot quicker. And our level designer Ian, he was just able to start banging stuff out like crazy, and which was great. The testers couldn't keep up, which is always a good problem to have. Usually it's the other way around to some degree. But that was a good question. Yeah, down in the front. Well, you know what? To be quite honest, I would. Jason for the win. Really, because I'm not really a programmer, an engineer per se. I use Unity, but it's pretty much already set up for me to do the creative direction and to do the design. But the Unity communities and those types of networks are chock full of people that are just frothing at the mouth to answer that question right there. So, Unity's got really great support, and their community is very, very active. So, it's just going to require just a little bit of digging. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jason. Thank you very, very much. All right. So now we're going to get into kind of defining indie. Now, this isn't everything that defines indie, but it's the best that I could just kind of come up with just off of just like a knee jerk. Indies usually don't have publishers. It's just usually guys and girls that have gotten together and they're just doing it on their own merit and their own steam and just trying to make their way through the universe with their idea. They're usually smaller teams, just because it's most people have day jobs and have families and friends and lives, and so they can't necessarily commit a lot of time. And the bigger the team gets, the more dependencies you've got, and it just starts to get very convoluted quickly. It's hard to get in touch with people. It's hard to get assets that you need at the right time to get things plugged in, and then you just have people waiting, which causes burnout and anxiety and whatever. So keeping the team small is actually a really good thing, but it also makes people have to wear a lot of hats, and so they're starting to move into roles that they're not necessarily familiar with, but it's actually a good thing, right? I mean, it's good to kind of get an understanding and an appreciation for other disciplines and see where those dependencies are and how things kind of move down through the pipeline instead of just getting kind of specialized in one role, which is fairly typical at most AAAs. If you're good at something, bam, you're going to get pigeonholed, and they're going to want to keep you there because you're making them money, and they can really lean on you because they have a lot of confidence. But whereas indies, you do have a tendency to bounce around a lot. Oh, sure. Um, I I don't know. You know what? It's so funny. It's like everybody thinks that there's a club. Like you get an indie card, and it's like the minute that you get a publisher or some success, all of a sudden you're kicked out of the club and you're not one of us anymore. And you know what? That's just really kind of simple, stupid, I should say, because we're all here to make games. And we all want to produce something that other people are going to enjoy in the same experience that we're having. So whether it's indie or independent or AAA or anything like that, I don't give a crap. If you're putting out something that's awesome and I'm going to have fun playing with it and it's going to take my time away from my kids because I'm enjoying it, I'm going to love it. So I, you know, you don't get a badge. There's nothing that really comes from saying I was an indie and I am successful and other than just the accolades of peers and whatever, and those that are applauding you, saying, yeah, good job, you did it on your own merit, or you had to go out and find a publisher or whatever. Doesn't matter. Just get the game out. Do what you love. Be proud of what it is you do, and if you have to get a publisher, fine. If you have to do crowdfunding, fine. Nobody's going to slight you for it. If anything, they're going to envy you for it. So, I hope that answers the question. Thank you. So obviously indies have a lot of creative freedom, which is awesome, but that can also be a double-edged sword, can it? So it's like you can just keep feature creeping. How many have heard that term before? And just iterating all day long because God forbid I actually lock down on something and then I'm slave to it, and so we're just going to keep iterating and iterating, and so you got to watch out for that. There needs to come a point to where you got to just draw a line in the sand and say, okay, we're moving forward. We got to discover a new feature, or we got to work that out, that play mechanic, and get it working right so it's not breaking or whatever. So there's always a sequel. Who said that? All right, there's a dollar bill under your chair. Obviously, little to no money. We kind of covered that a little bit with the whole publisher and crowdfunding thing. It's a labor of love, isn't it? I mean, it's just that's kind of what it is. It's something that you're passionate about. There's free tools out there, that make it very accessible. There's large communities out there of people just like you, guys like me, that want to help, that want to say that, hey, you know what? I was a part of somebody's story. I was a part of getting, the next Braid, or the next Insanely Twisted Shadow Planet, or Castle Crashers, or whatever it might be out there. I had a small part in that, even though I was kind of messaging through threads or whatever. It doesn't matter. We're all a community. We're all a culture. We've got to help each other out. Obviously, with indies, you have greater ownership because it's a small team, not this vast studio of hundreds of people working on a game, like on a Force Unleashed or a Clone Wars IP, or a movie to game franchise, like The Matrix that I did a while ago. There was hundreds of people on that team, plus outsourcing. So it was just like you'd walk into the studio and you meet a new person every day. It was it was really weird. Obviously, crowdfunded, a lot of it. Although we're starting to see, a number of professional, independent developers now really starting to take the crowdfunding a little bit more serious and starting to get up to the millions of dollars, and that's really kind of cool. And of course, digital distribution through Steam and what's the other one I'm thinking of? Yeah, what's the EA one? Origin. Thank you. It was right there. And so that's another great incentive as well. No longer do you need a publisher. I mean, hey, getting in Walmart and Target is great. That's fantastic. But, digitally distributing your game through Steam, working with that community, kind of getting a fan base, getting the likes, that's really cool. Hard work, but it's still very cool. Something that AAAs aren't afforded a lot. All right, so I had mentioned earlier how we're going to talk a little bit about the similarities between AAA and indie studios, and where's that fuzzy crossover? What are we talking about here? So obviously, games, well, they should start with pen and paper. They really kind of need to be at that basic level. I know we've got tools out there, Google SketchUp, we've got Photoshop, we've got Max and Maya, and all these other types of tools that we can start to just go straight into CG and start noodling around with thousands of layers and all kinds of cool shaders and tools and whatever. But there's something to be said about just drawing some lines on paper and flipping the pencil over and erasing if you need to. You don't feel so, because you're trying to get ideas out quickly, to get buy-in from the whole team. And even though they're chicken scratches in their thumbnails and they're ugly or whatever, at least there's contours there that can start to communicate an idea. Rather than spending hours in Photoshop or toiling over, a model in 3ds Max or Maya or whatever, only to finally get it in front of the other, team members to sit there and say, yeah, that's not going to work. And then your whole day or a couple of days or whatever is gone when you could have just kind of sketched something out and done a real quick turnaround, or something of that nature. So AAAs and indies, they still both kind of come from that. Obviously, there's passion. Very, very much so. Even in AAAs, of course, there's a lot of passion, even though most of them are salaried and you might think that there's a level of complacency that settles in. They splash each other all the time. They're playing games all the time. They're keeping each other's spirits up. And just like indies, it's the same culture, just kind of just different street names. They live on the same block. Both are apprehensive, and what I mean by apprehensive is anytime you start something new, it's scary, all right? And you've got excitement and you've got anxiety all at the same time. You get the hot flashes and the cold sweats or whatever it is, and AAAs have that, indies have that when you're starting to go into something new, and like we were talking about before, it's like, oh, I want to keep iterating. I don't want to lock down on an idea because it's scary, because that means it's set in stone and I really can't go back and change it because I'm going to start building dependencies on that. And so both go through that. And the other thing is that both kind of envy each other. I know working at AAA studios, I'd always be kind of jealous of the indies because of some of the things that we stated earlier. It got so much creative freedom. There's not somebody just kind of just standing over them and browbeating them or saying no, it's got to look like this, or it's like I'm beholden to a brand, and God forbid I make the character's outfit look like this when it says it's looking right like that according to the IP or the brand. Believe me, with Star Wars, we ran into a lot of that. A lot of talented people at that studio, lot of great ideas. I mean, it was awesome being there. And all of them wanted to have an original idea. But Lucas licensing, it was very, very difficult to get approval for them because, I mean, think of all the thousands of volumes that they've got with just the Star Wars canon, but then you've got the extended universe. And so they were always kind of coming back to us saying, nope, use something from the archive. Don't try and come up with anything original. It was always just kind of disheartening, and it's just like, oh, to be an indie, to be able to create, you know, a really cool style or aesthetic. And then, of course, indies are like, oh, what would it be like to have heat? What would it be like to have food down the hall and free drinks and whatever? So, exactly. So you see where I'm going with this? I mean, so there's envy on both sides, and both have communication issues, very, very much so. And for reasons that are pretty self-explanatory is the fact that indies, you know, for the most part, if you're lucky to kind of work in a studio together, but most of the time the team's pretty remote. You're going through Skype or going to a meeting, or you're on the phone, or you're doing email or instant messaging. I mean, there's a slew of ways to keep in communication, but it's kind of hard when you're head down and you don't want to be bothered. Another meeting, I just want to work, you know, and whatever. Whereas in AAAs, it's like these teams are so massive and these meetings are so long, and, you know, half the meeting doesn't even relate to me. Why am I sitting here? Can I bring my laptop, please, so I can at least get some work done? And so communication is tough on both sides. So for those that are indies, don't think they've got it any better at AAAs. And for those in AAAs or, you know, professional development studios, indies got it bad too. Okay, and both have unique cons and pros, and so let's start getting into some of those. All right, I hope this isn't getting too depressing. I swear to God, it gets lighter. It really does. All right, I'm gonna lift this ship back off the ground. All right, we're just kind of skidding along the runway right now. All right, so the AAA cons, other than the similarities, these are all different games, by the way. I have $5 to anybody that can tell me which games these are. All right, come up to me afterwards, and I'll let you know if you're right. And I'll be walking right out that exit, so you're gonna have to chase after me. All right, so obviously everybody, well, not everybody. I'm sorry, I don't mean to generalize, but most of the people that I run into are like, God, I would love to work for Blizzard. Oh, I'd love to work for Obsidian. I'd love to work for AAA, EA. Oh, my dream, you know, and whatever. And while that's all well and good, and that has its merit, a lot of times these studios, you know, you've got to go where the jobs are, right? And so a lot of times relocation comes into play. You know, it's like, okay, you want to work for those studios, but what are you willing to sacrifice? You know, what are you willing to give up? If somebody was actually give you a call back and say, yeah, you know, hey, we'd love to, your interview went really well, and, you know, your price point's good, and if you got it, yeah, we'll fly out here, and, you know, that's fine if you can say goodbye to mom and dad and you know, your friends and your family or whatever. So it's all about counting the costs for what it is that you want. Obviously, you've heard about the dreaded crunch times. You know, these AAAs are investing a lot of money in their franchises and their studios, and they got to get it done. And so, you know, it's not uncommon, you know, to spend nights at the studios or long, long days. So that's definitely a reality. And you're the publisher's BI, so, you know, you're kind of beholden to the guy and the girl that's holding the purse strings, you know, that's keeping the lights on in the studio, and that's paying your check. So it's like, if they tell you to go left, guess where you're going? You're going left. Of course, that's kind of right for you guys. You're going left. So obviously, we touched on this. You're kind of beholden to the brand and the IP that's kind of just put in your lap. You know, so it's like if you're in a studio and all of a sudden they throw Barbie at you, sorry, you know, you gotta kind of suck it up and do it, and just start to fall in love with, you know, oh boy, them's fighting words. And of course, incremental innovation. And, you know, this is, I could probably get pushback on this, but I'm kind of generalizing. I'm not saying that this is law. This is just kind of Mark's interpretation, all right? So you can pepper me later and say that I'm completely full of it and I'm wrong and I'm, you know, whatever, that's fine. But incremental innovation basically means that you're not seeing the heavy type of stylization or innovative game mechanics or something like that in most large franchises. You know, you're seeing these annualized franchises, which is down there at the bottom, where the mechanics are staying pretty much the same. And you know, they're throwing in a few little curveballs here and there with some interesting features or whatnot, but they have to keep things somewhat the same because they've already built such a fan base, and they're trying to keep the learning curves as low as possible in order to hit the biggest market possible to bring in the money that's going to pay for the hundreds of millions that they just spent on this title and the marketing budgets and different things of that nature. So the last thing they want is for a player to feel stupid and frustrated and throw the game down and rage quit. Is what you'll do with Rush Brothers, I promise you. Everybody good so far? That wasn't very convincing. Yeah, okay, good. All right. So the indie cons, obviously you guys are on a shoestring budget. The inexperience is there. The team's kind of peppered with, you know, some veterans, some out of school, some that are hobbyists or, you know, just are passionate about games. They want to do their part, and so there can be sometimes a lot of inconsistencies on the team, which kind of makes things interesting. They're kind of more of a niche market. We kind of covered how AAAs have a tendency to go for a big, wide net. Indies, they're not so concerned with that. You know, they don't mind targeting a small community, you know, and really kind of getting a cult following and so on and so forth. You know, but then of course that potentially could lead to a little bit of burnout because, you know, money's tight, there's not a lot of time, you're doing it on your own time or what have you, and so you can start to get tired, you know, and just that, you can start to get burned out. So now we're going to start to take the plane up. We're going to talk about the pros. So you've got ownership. All right. So there's something that you're actually taking away that you have invested into this game. Unlike AAAs, where most of the time you get a barcode stamped to your neck and you're kind of doing the same thing title after title, there's a lot of creative input that you can have, obviously, in indie development. That's something that I find very attractive, especially as a game developer and as just a fanboy of games. You have a lot of creative independence. You know, the innovation is definitely there. I love going on to Steam. I love checking out the new titles. There's a title right now. It's in one of the slides, but you actually use the lights of the environment to cast shadows that you can jump on the shadows, and it brings in a whole new mechanic of gameplay. That's just awesome. I love that kind of stuff. You can kind of work at your own pace, you know, depending on how much you need to get that game done, or if there's a competition coming up, you know, or an independent game festival or some type of show that you've got to get into. But for the most part, you don't have somebody just kind of cracking the whip other than yourself and your own time management or maybe some other team members. But, you know, it can be a little bit more at a casual pace. And you get to a lot of times choose your own tech and pipeline. I know that you mentioned that you're creating your own proprietary, you know, engine and whatever. Wow, mind blown. That's just wow. Hats off to you, man. You know, and of course, community building. A lot of times, indies, they're very plugged in to their community, or at least they should be, and getting feedback. You know, and actually start getting more of a personal touch. For AAAs, they have PR and they've got marketing that kind of handle that. And so most of the time, for like guys like me that are in a development capacity, we don't really hear the fans. We don't really monitor the chats or RCs or anything like that. So we're kind of numb to it. But indies, they have the opportunity to get right in the thick of it and actually start having some crosstalk, which is awesome. And of course, you have the ability and the opportunity to really make a name for yourself. If something really goes big, you get all the accolades. You know, you don't have to divide it up amongst a humongous team, you know, where your name is lost in the credits. Now you have a small team, you kick some serious butt, you got something out there, you worked hard, people love it, it's starting to sell tens of thousands of units, you're getting in magazines, and, you know, that feels really great when you actually start to get that kind of recognition. All right, where to start when starting out? All right, now obviously you've got to do something you like. Okay, because if you don't, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's like, yeah, there's might be a new mechanic that you want to work on that you're trying to scoop somebody else or whatever. But I mean, if you're really not, if your heart's not into it, believe me, there's going to come the dark times in development to where all you have is a little torch of passion to carry you through that long, depressing hallway. And so if you're definitely not working on something that you're passionate about or that you don't like, it's gonna get really, really hard. Um, Being clear with your features and having a realistic scope, um, that's obviously very, very important. You want to try and lock down on what that is right out of the gate. And if you're having trouble, well, what's a real core feature of my game, or what is the scope of my game? I can't see more than a couple of weeks ahead because everything's still fuzzy. I had a friend at LucasArts. His name was Harry Kenny, and he was the business development director. And he would see pitches from different studios, third-party studios, independents, whatever, come across his desk trying to get Lucas to help publish or fund their titles and take them through development. And so Harry would get stacks and stacks and stacks of these pitches. And they would come into the studio and we'd sit down with them, myself and the tech director, the executive producer. Harry would be there and maybe some other people from the team. And we'd listen to their story. And Harry would keep looking at his watch, and a lot of times he would cut to the chase, and he would just ask them straight out, if I had a box cover here with your game, and I see the cover art and it looks really great, and I flip it over and I start looking at the bullet points, and I see a tagline that says, for the first time ever, what is that? What do you fill that blank in with? You'd be surprised how many people would be like, and then Harry would just be like, there's a door. There's a door. Come back and see us, in a couple of months when you figure it out. But that's awesome. I mean, that's a great way to really think about it. For the first time ever in my game, I'm going to be able to, if it was Fracture, I'm going to be able to do terrain deformation. If it was Prince of Persia, I'm going to be able to control time. If it's, whatever. And so it starts getting the juices flowing, starts getting you thinking in that vein to start answering those tough questions. That's going to carry you through development. It's going to set a core foundation that everything else is going to get built on. And then, of course, you start asking yourself the why. And what I mean by that is just the other week I was over at Chapman College and looking over a number of the students and their projects that they had been working on, their midterms. And one of them was really awesome, this great puzzle game that was incredible. It was this beautiful fantasy environment. I mean, it was really rich and it was gorgeous. But I asked the why. It's like, why am I compelled to solve all these puzzles? Oh, well, if you don't, the island's dying. It's going to die and da-da-da. It's just like, why do I care? I mean, I just kind of landed my boat on this island and now I'm stuck here doing these puzzles, which are fun. But I could just get in my boat and go somewhere else. Why am I tied to this island? What's the emotional attachment? Why am I empathetic? So start asking the whys as well as the for the first time evers. Yeah. For the first time ever, for the first time ever, at least for me, you're able to get the kind of the three genres that I talked about. You're able to get the music thumping and the response of the gameplay and the mechanics of like an audio surf. You're able to get the excitement and the accelerated rush and rage quit potential of Rush Brothers, and then you get the real cool stylistic flair of these real highly visual contrasting types of environments with the dark foregrounds and the backgrounds of like an insanely twisted shadow planet. So that's kind of how I would sum it up. You kind of get a 3-in-1, so it's just not a one-off, it's a 3-off. Okay. All right. Oh, that's another thing. Finding like-minded people to work with you on your project, obviously very, very important, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. And getting the legal stuff out of the way when you're starting to form a team is really, really important, especially if you're working with friends or colleagues or different things like that. I know this is uncomfortable to talk about, but get it out of the way early, because God forbid that you get into production and you're both going, full tilt into this thing, and you have a problem. What was it? Phil Fish, Indie Game the movie. Did you guys ever see that movie? It's a great film. It really is. I mean, that really gives you. That's kind of the dark side of indie development. That movie was actually kind of depressing. But Phil Fish he was one of the co-creators of Fez, a great game, and him and his partner, the other guy that he was developing with, they had a major fallout. And Phil was going to be taking this game to the show, which he continued to work on while this other guy just went somewhere else and pounded sand. But he really couldn't sell it to a publisher if there was somebody that had interest, or he really couldn't even show the game without this other guy's permission who was not answering his calls. And Phil bought the ticket, he rented the booth space, he's invested all this money, and he's still waiting for permission from this other person. And so that's tough, especially when you put so much heart and passion into a project, and then you start to get the relational type of things that can potentially come in. So the sooner you can start to take care of this early on, not just a handshake, not just a verbal confirmation, but try and get some documents in writing, in some capacity of how you're going to do percentage splits or royalty share or who owns what, or those kind of contingencies. I really encourage you to think about that. All right, so now we come to, which is not here. All right. There's supposed to be a big triangle right here. And basically it says good, fast, or no, cheap, fast, and good. And in here it says you can only pick two. All right. And so it's been my experience, especially when starting out doing indie development or any kind of development for that matter, right out of the gate, is to everybody wants to do the good. Everybody wants to make something polished. We're passionate. We don't want to turn out crap, and we don't want to have our name assigned to something that people are like, eh. But at the same time, we're trying to accomplish something here, right? We're trying to get something out the door that we're at least somewhat proud of, and that we're setting ourselves up for a win and some victory to do the next project, somebody said. So I had circled here mysteriously, cheap and fast. And I'm going to qualify that with saying it doesn't mean that you have to settle. All it means is that if you're doing it cheap and you're doing it fast, it means that when something breaks or something goes wrong or you hit that wall, you don't lose all the wind in your sails and you're like, oh my God, you got to go all the way back to square one. It's like, no, usually it's a small couple steps back to moving forward again. It's like the hits aren't as hard. And you're still moving towards the finish line at a quick pace. And I reached out to a couple of friends, good friends of mine, and colleagues. And I don't know if anybody is familiar with Chris Taylor and Gas Powered Games. They did Dungeon Siege 3 and whatnot. And Jason De La Roca. And Jason is a real evangelist for indies, and he's got a whole company based around helping indies get out there, and get marketed and start doing, promotional and PR and all that kind of stuff. So he's quite amazing. He's like in the top 50 who's who of the developers worldwide. So I mean, this is a very much both of these guys are very much influencers. Have been in the industry for about 30 years at least. So anyways, I was talking to Chris about it, and I said, what's your take on this? Do you think that the fast and cheap model is a way to go? And he wrote back and he said, you gotta keep your ego in check. And so basically what he was agreeing with it. Keep the team small, get together with like-minded people, and try and realize something that is going to get you a victory and a win. And Jason De La Roca said the same thing. In fact, Jason went even a step further, which I was really kind of raised an eyebrow at, and he sat there and he said, actually set yourself up for some failures. And I'm like, who sets herself up for failures? I was like, this is the most stupid advice in the world. What are you talking about? And he went on to say that, but it's through the failing that you find the success. It's through these trial and error situations that you can actually learn a best practice by failing, right? You know what not to do again. That's a best practice right there. And so Jason and Chris, they were both agreeing, as well as a number of other people that I just didn't even bother to quote up there because I knew it was going to crash. So we can keep going with that. But I'd be more than happy to take a few more questions. I know I'm kind of flying all over the place here, so I hope everybody's okay. Yeah, back there. Are the sunglasses on the head? Did you have a question? No, you were just stretching. Oh, that was you. Oh, okay. We had the core team was 7. Yeah, about 7 people, and then we would bring on testers, or we'd bring on support programmers, or tool programmers to help us work with Unity to get kind of the prefabs going, maybe to help us do some batching or some scripting. So we'd bring on some contractors or some friends for a short amount of time, but really it was about 7 to 8 people that were just head down dedicated 100% of the time on the project that took ownership. So yeah, was there another question? Let's just keep going. Yeah. I've released 2. I've worked on 6. So actually, that's a great average when you really think about it. It's a really, really good average. The last indie game that was really successful was an 8-bit RTS game. It was called Warfare Incorporated, and that was a lot of fun. And we did that for the Palm Pilots. Anybody remember those? As well as for the mobile, for the first gen phones. That was really cool. And I just actually was talking to the partners of that production, who are 2 Microsoft brats that basically got out of the company, cashed in their stock, and now they own islands. I mean, they're pretty awesome. And I said, can we do a 32-bit version? And I've got all the art, I've got all the assets, they're all in 3D to just, get them higher res and to pull the camera in a little closer. It'd be just awesome. So I'm hoping to get that call back. But yeah, so a couple of successes and some just gut-crunching failures. Is there a question? Oh, go ahead. No, right over here. No, just straight out of the box, really. A lot of, video games, let's be honest, is all smoke and mirrors. It's just magic tricks, really. And the more that we can do with billboarding and shaders to make it look like we're actually, writing new lines of code or having some proprietary this or whatever, hey, that's great. If we can keep that illusion up all day and still use what's out of the box, fine with me. I'll do that all day long. Yeah, over here. No, I don't. If it's gonna let me get my game out, I don't care. I'll pimp to anybody. Really. Uh huh. Right. Yeah, to be quite honest, I really don't know. I don't have analytic data. He was asking, if there's I believe you were asking if there's like one particular mobile device that's more successful than the others, or any platform that's more successful. Geez, I really don't know, to be quite honest with you. Like I said, if my game can get on it and it can get in the hands of a community that I've helped build or that I've found that's out there that I can start talking to and getting feedback as to what they want, I want to build for them. And if they're playing on the iPhone, that's great. And Android, that's fantastic. If they're on tablets, great. I'll res up the artwork. It's not a big deal. So, yeah. Oh, that was so sad. That was really sad. Okay. Yeah. Okay, he was saying the fact that in the last Game Developer magazine, which moment of silence, I love that magazine. It was so great. I felt that was just like such an industry magazine. It was so raw. He said in that last issue there was a great article written about Android just kind of just really starting to hockey stick up and more accessibility and kind of attraction happening there. So that's good. Thanks. Good tip. Alrighty, moving on. Moving on. Is anybody getting sick from watching that? Sorry, I got all stoked with this whole Prezi thing. I just found it just about a month ago, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this thing can do so much. It's like the first time everybody found page curl in Photoshop. Everything had page curl. Or it's like, oh my god, it does a lens flare. Everything had lens flare. It's like when bullet time came out on the Matrix. It's like, wait a minute, car commercials are using bullet time now. The diaper commercials are using bullet time now. What? Come on. So I apologize. Sorry, that's just my little excitement coming out with all the twirls. So if it's making you sick, I apologize. All right. Steps to dev success. Documentation. This is really, really key, and it is the most boring thing. I totally get it. Everybody wants to make pretty graphics. Everybody wants to write hot lines of codes. Nobody wants to actually sit down and prepare documentation that is just going to take time. When they want to be, banging on the drum all day, they got to be writing in a doc all day. But let me tell you why it is good. And most of you already know this, but I'm getting it on the record for those that are tuning in live and the video stream and different things of that nature. The game development document and the technical design document, or the game design document and the technical design document, are absolutely very, very critical. They're really, really important. They are, especially in AAA. We can't really move forward without them. We need to have a roadmap. We need to know where we're going. There's a lot of people that are moving. It's a big assembly line to some degree. But that's not to say that indies can't adopt the same thing as well, and they should. Because even though it might not necessarily be a 500-page document like Star Wars Battlefront 3, it could be a 5-page document. It could be a 10-page document. Heck, it could be a pitch document. At least there's something in writing that everybody can go back to and open up an email or a Word doc or a WordPad or whatever and be like, hey, we wrote this a couple months ago. It says we're here. We should be here. We're way over here. How did that happen? So it's something that kind of brings you back to center. And it's also documentation that just, again, it's something that everybody can kind of come to the same table and appreciate and kind of platform from. Obviously, it defines the core features, the mechanics, the naming conventions. All right, how many have run into problems with naming conventions? All right, that is a nightmare situation. That's where the technical design document really comes into play, is when you start mapping out for your team, especially if there's a lot of assets or if there's a lot of character customization or weapons or ammunition or different things of that nature. Having good naming conventions with underscores, not spaces, is really, really critical to start implementing and getting that in the hands of everybody on the team that's responsible for creating assets and getting a structure going there. I've heard horror stories of people that have had to go back through hundreds of assets in order to rename things because the code just couldn't find it, and so it kept coming up with just crap or kept breaking or whatever, and so that was really just disenfranchising. And of course, we talked about, why document? It's a small project. I mean, goodness, how much stuff could there be to write? Well, there's really no small project. When you start out with an idea and you start working towards it, all these other things start cropping up out of nowhere, and you're like, where in the world did this stuff come from? You got to start writing it down. You got to start documenting it. Keeps you on your course. It defines the processes and the steps and the pipeline for when new people come on the project. So you can just kind of hand them this document, and it can get them up to speed in just a matter of minutes. And they've got something that they can either take back to their desk, or you could email. And so when they're at home, they're looking at this, while they're making a sandwich or whatever. And, it gets them on the same page, even though they might be new to the production. So documentation is really, really key. I know it's not sexy, but it's key. So, and does anybody know what a postmortem is in a game? Okay. Not a lot of studios do it. I mean, we endeavor to, but usually when a game is just starting to end, another one's ramping up, and so nobody really has time to come back to the table for a couple of days and just hash out what went wrong. We'll look back over the design document, we'll see what was originally written and where we are now, and where the mistakes were made, or even where some of the best practices were employed, or the emergent design, or the emergent visuals that we hadn't anticipated. That's what these, the GDD and the TDD are really good for. Should you ever get to that point to where you finally get a title out and you're moving on to your next one, it's like, okay, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? Because if you don't start writing it down, you're just going to forget. Especially if you've got any subtlety of ADD like me, you're going to forget it in like 10 minutes. So get it down in writing. All right. Now, the most valuable player on a team, who would you say the most valuable player on a team is? Anybody? Programmer? Producer? A what? A leader? Yeah, like a team lead. All right, so I've got engineer, producer, team lead, everybody. Yeah, there's no I in team, right? Is that how it goes? Well, it's been my experience. While the senior engineer, yes, is the demigod of, he or she is the one that just kind of, if they don't come into work that day, everybody's just kind of hosed, But at the same time, I really feel just over the years of development and productions that I've been on, the unsung heroes are really the producer. Now, the producer obviously is a very key role, and it requires somebody that has a very kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. Somebody that appreciates all the different disciplines in the communities, but somebody that is really good at communicating. Somebody that's really good at the details, that can appreciate what an engineering, what the programmers are doing, what the animators are doing. They might not necessarily have to know exactly what it is, but they still need to be able to take what it is that they're doing, or understand, the walls that they're hitting or the resources that they need, and start to go out and find ways to keep the team together, keep the schedule together, find out where the money's going, and who needs the lion's share of this or that. The producers are really important. I like to think of them as like the spider in the middle of the web, where they've got a leg on each strand of the different communities. And so a little vibration here means that the producer goes, talks to somebody, and he brings that information over to here. And so it's he or she is kind of the keeper of all this knowledge, and is continually vetting it on the schedule, on the the production pipeline, on the design doc, on the technical docs. They're very aware of this. And even for indie teams, especially teams that are remote, where, like we said, you're communicating through phone or through chat or Skype or whatever. Having somebody there that is taking notes, is making sure that assets are getting turned in on time, that is making sure that a version control system is put in place, like SVN or SourceSafe or Alien Brain or something of that nature, that people are checking in their work. So producers actually are really, really very key. The unsung heroes. All right, again, another step to dev success is wear your game camera. Now, the reason why I say this is because, especially being a creative director and having done art direction as well, knowing where the camera is going to be placed in the game is very important, especially for my art pipeline as well as a design pipeline. Getting that established right out of the gate is obviously going to start to tell me immediately where the lion's share of my efforts need to be, dedicated towards. So, we have an example here of a first-person shooter. Now, the camera is obviously low, and it's horizon line. So it means, as an artist and as an art director, I'm thinking of not necessarily so much about the ceilings, but I really want to pack details in on the points of interest, like the walls and the floor. I want to make sure that there's a lot of information there, because that's where the eye is trained most of the time. As you're looking back and forth, as you're going to points of interest and you're opening doors, you're getting really close to the detail. You want to see the distressing. You're not necessarily just walking the whole time up at the ceiling. You're looking in front of you. You're trying to find targets and enemy units or what have you. So that's something to to take into consideration for the art pipeline as well as the design pipeline. Where is that camera going to be in a first person? So let's take it to the other echelon. We'll go to an RTS game, which is usually what we call an isometric view, where the camera's kind of pulled up and back. And so now, instead of kind of being close to the action, you're more overlooking the action, which now means my art pipeline is going to be concentrating not necessarily so much on the sides of objects as is the tops. I'm going to be starting to think about more contrasting colors to really define factions. I'm going to start to think of my units and my characters almost more in a silhouette type of form to really make sure that as all this chaos is happening, I know that that's a heavy tank, and I know that that's a machine gun tank, or that it's a rocket unit, and that's a machine gun unit. I'm not going to have to really strain, because when all this crap is happening at once in real time, and I've got a whole map to scan around, I need to be able to know instantly who it is and where they are and what they mean to me as a player if I'm going to get my butt kicked or if I'm going to kick someone else's. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. All right. So again, getting back to Fracture. Now this was a really interesting thing. We were talking a little bit about emergent design. Now that term basically means that as you're going along production, all of a sudden something unexpected happens, like a cool mechanic comes out of, just playing through a certain level, and you start to notice things different. Like if you're able to get to a demo state really quickly, or a vertical slice to where you're going through runtime of your game, and all of a sudden you recognize something different. And ooh, this would be actually really cool if we turned it this way, or if we went through the level backwards, and it creates a whole, boy, we just got 2 levels out of 1. That's awesome. When we were first developing Fracture, it actually started out as a first-person shooter. And we had this great, for the first time ever, terrain deformation. You're able to change the topology to gain tactical advantage. That was the big marketing hook. And it was a first-person shooter game, which was really great because we were going to be the first ones to come out with a FPS that had terrain deformation and had unique weaponry to, to do stuff with the terrain and whatever. But about 7 or so months into production, as we're building all this stuff out, a number of the producers and George Lucas got together, and they're like, you know what? I'm not feeling it. First person, I'm losing something. And what they were losing, which I didn't agree with at the time because I knew it was going to be a lot of work for the team to have to go back in and change it to third person. I mean, that was just nuts. I mean, you want to just talk about just going along and just slapping everybody in the head. That was just horrible. But they were right. You didn't really have the appreciation of scale in a first person because your hands were here, and so when you'd loaf the environment up, or you'd put up a big stalagmite off the ground, or you'd depress the ground or whatever, there was nothing really there to give you any context of how deep that hole was or how high that hill was. And so we found that when we pulled Jet Brody back into third person, we were actually able to really start to appreciate a lot of the scale. And it actually opened up the field of view a little wider and gave us a lot more depth. And so again, that was kind of emergent design that cropped up again and kind of out of nowhere. It was expensive, but it was George's dime, so he could afford it. It took, like I said, it kind of took the wind out of our sales and the developers' sales, because they're like, all that work just has to, oh, that's so bad. But it was crazy. I mean, honestly, he has no hair, and we went through a month just going through different hairstyles. I mean, there was one point he looked like Vanilla Ice. He had like stripes in his hair and everything. And then finally we were just like, you know what, screw it, shave the man's hair. Let's just get him bald, and we'll put some kind of funky, whatever, mechanical thing around his head that's got a blue light that looks really good from the back, so it's entertaining. So I still don't even know what that does. All right. So again, I'm going to just play a quick clip here to show you just kind of the necessity of having the character pulled back, so you can really appreciate the scale. Boom, when he breadloafs the environment up, and he's using it as cover against this mechanical gun that he's trying to take out here, which is the mechanical gun's bullets are actually taking the terrain down, and so he has to keep lifting it up again in order not to get shot. But I thought it was a good call. I thought it was a really good design call. It was expensive, like I said, but it was necessary. So that's all well and good. So I think we're landing the plane. So, there's a lot of other best practices and techniques that I could definitely go on to, but I want to just kind of open it up for some questions right now. But just thank you for your time, guys, really. I hope this helped. So. All right. Did anybody have any other questions? Yeah, down front. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It sounds stupidly simple, but yeah. No, it's not rocket science, really. I mean, yes, of course, you're making a game for yourself, but at the same time, you're making it for other people. And so you want to go out and you want to find those communities. Yeah, it sucks. It's a little homework. You gotta do, a little time management there. You want to be coding, you want to be doing art, whatever it is, you want to be doing design. I appreciate that. But at the same time, if you're not reaching somebody that it's going to go to, what's the point? I mean, yeah, good for you. That's fun. You're making a game for yourself, and that's all well and good, but you're really making it for other people. And so you want to find those communities, and if they're not there, build them. Get people excited. Say you've got the best thing going on ever, and you know what? They're really out to lunch if they're not here. And you start to get them really excited. One of the things that I've found is a new technique that a lot of people are using, not a lot of people, but Again, I'm plugged into a lot of communities. I do a lot of networking, and it keeps me excited, and it keeps me, fresh, and it keeps me inspired. I don't get stagnant. I'm always learning. If there's one thing that I would just wish everybody to be is SpongeBob, just always soaking up everything. I mean, just walking around, just appreciating other talents, appreciating other designs, using it as inspiration. But one of these groups was saying that they've been finding a lot of success on the Steam Greenlight is not necessarily doing just a really nice promo of their game, like a sizzle reel or something like that that's showing really good gameplay or it's trying to tell a story. Actually, a lot of the developers have been finding if they do kind of more of a Kickstarter, behind the scenes, more of a personal touch to their videos, as well as showing gameplay elements, but giving people kind of a behind the scenes look of the struggles or their passion, and they're finding that they're connecting a lot more with the audience, and it creates a lot more threads, it creates a lot more comments, because all of a sudden now the game has got a human face, it's got a human element, and it takes it kind of out of that. I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, but I think you get where I'm going. So that's another strategy to think about. So if you're considering Steam or Greenlight, have your sizzle video, and make sure that it's hot. I mean, start getting it out there on social networks first, and start getting feedback as to what you could do or might not do, because once you release it on Steam, it's gonna, you only get that first chance, to really get a huge following. So you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward and not just trying to hurry to get something out there because you want to try and build something quickly. Now you got to take your time, but definitely start to think about putting more of a personal touch and some behind the scenes types of interviews. Make a video that's about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes long, nothing more than that, otherwise people start to glaze over. So, but that was a good question. Yes. Oh yeah, sure. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, back there. Where did we find funding for Rush Brothers? Very rich Indian people. over in New Delhi, to be quite honest with you. What's that? Well, they found me, actually. So it was kind of a reverse model. You know, they had an idea, but it wasn't really fleshed out. They tried to go to Valve before Greenlight was ever around. You'd submit to Valve personally, and they'd have a team of people that would go through and vet, your pitch or your demo or whatever. And they got kicked to the curb quick. And I saw the game initially, and I'm like, I can understand why. It looks like dog squeeze. It's horrible. So, they were sitting there saying, well, we've got a little bit of money, not much, but is there something that you can do to help us? And I said, yeah, of course. I can come in and I can, pull these three kind of inspirational designs, these genres together like we talked about. I know a lot of other talented people, guys and girls that are a lot better than I am, that I would love to come in because I've built relationships with them. They trust me. They know that I'm not going to steer them wrong. They're going to get their name on a good title. We get to work together again, which is exciting. So that's kind of how it all came about. How he found me, God knows. I don't know. But like I said, I really, because I do career coaching, and for me, the brand is built around me, around my name, Mark Soderwall, and so I'm out there communicating with everybody and trying to give back as much as I can without asking people to pay for it. I don't mind giving advice. I don't mind doing this, for free, even though this is my livelihood and I do get paid for coaching and for, directing indie teams and helping people with their careers and getting jobs and different things like that. I'm always on Facebook. I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm always on Twitter. I am just blasting all the time, answering messages and emails, and it's great because I get fed. I almost think I get more from people than I actually think I give back. I just actually said that on the record, didn't I? Anybody else? These are good questions. Yeah. Well, it's funny. Oh yeah. He asked the 4 games that didn't get released, the indie games that I did, what were some of the reasons that those kind of just went, into the abyss. 2 of the reasons were producer, not having one. It started out as a small team, and hindsight's 2020. We thought we'd be able to do without bringing a producer on board. We weren't weighted down so much with our own tasks and burdened that we can kind of manage. We can kind of track ourselves and have some casual checks and balances. Because when things started really rolling and we were starting to get hit with all kinds of different features, and we were bug running and we were getting testers, and now we're starting to get feedback and we're having to fix things. Schedules just went out the window, and then the executives are like, what's going on? And so it was just a snowball effect really after that. One of the other projects, it just took too long, and people were getting burned out, or they were getting jobs and actual developers and getting paid money. So that's, how do you compete with that? So it's like you can't sit there and be like, no, you got to stay here and you got to suck it up and whatever, and have your kid eat paper. No, you want them to take the job. But so that were some of the reasons. But I'm serious about that producer thing. Producers are very, very key on a project. Good question. Yeah, down in front. Yeah, it did, and it passed. So, did my most recent did my most recent project, the Rush Brothers project, that team's game, go through Greenlight? Yes, it did, and it got lit. So it went through. Yeah. How long did we prototype? Jeez, about 6 months. It's about 6 months to just try and get to a decent vertical slice. To be quite honest, because we were working with a lot of mechanics, we were having to write a lot of stuff from scratch. And especially when you're working with jumping physics in a game that's fast like that, things got sticky, things were sluggish. I mean, we were just modifying integers by decimal points, just try and find the sweet spot. So it took a long time. And then of course trying to lock down on an art style, getting a producer on board. somebody that would be able to, draw a line in the sand and just sit there and say, all right, creative director, enough of your fussing about, make a decision and just own it. So that was good having somebody like that to kind of slap me around, so put me in my place. Over here, yes. What's the discipline of our core team through the breakdown of that? Sorry, I'm really bad at giving the questions back again. I can answer them fine, but I just can't repeat them. The core team, it was a lot of programmers. It really was. We had a fantastic conceptual artist that I found. His name was Kalen Chalk, who's now working at ILM. He did the psychedelic backgrounds and different things like that. I had a lot of fun directing that one because I would just go on the internet and Google image search, and I'd sketch some things out really loose and fast and throw in some color swatches and put some images in there, and I'd literally take them and just like mix them in a bowl and just be like, here you go, Kalen, do something with that, and he'd come up with just, the guy was smoking something when he was doing this stuff digitally, because he'd come back with just some of the most outlandish things. And it's so funny because a lot of the reviews I've read about the game, they praise the artwork and they're almost frustrated with the game because the game moves so fast that they can't really appreciate the art, because they want to look at the crazy designs and the depth of the backgrounds and all these different psychedelic themes, but they're having to avoid spikes and they're trying to beat the other player and whatever. But so we had I'd say about 3 artists and about 3 to 4 programmers off and on. So like I said before, the core team was about 7 people. So it was pretty half and half between artists and coders and engineers. So yeah, Jason. The hallmarks of a good design doc. Um, Something that is going to make me understand it right away, again for the first time ever. Something that gives me an immediate hook as to this is the core element which everything is built around. Tertiary types of designs or storylines or characters, that's all well and good, but I want to know what the core feature is that everything else is taking their cue from. And that's what a good design doc is going to start to tell me. It's going to drill down and illustrate very clearly as to what is that main story element, what is that main feature, that main hook. Because once I have that established, once I have that bedrocked, I could stand on that thing all day and feel perfectly balanced and confident that whatever I just start to stack and build on that is not going to fall over. Does that make sense? So yeah, try and dial down to that first time ever, to that story or that core concept of what's going to hold the whole game together. Yes, in the back. Yeah, for a small team, how do we handle develop our testing? Um, no, we really don't. We test the game. We bring in other friends. We give out licenses of the game to others, and just kind of just it's on the honor system. So like, don't share it with your friends or whatever. It's just real grassroots. It really is. And we try and get people in that are from I don't know, different sides of the tracks or whatever that aren't necessarily like us, because we want to get some constructive criticism or some feedback from other cultures or communities, just to see if what it is that we're doing is resonating with potentially another type of user or game player, or maybe they have some feedback that we hadn't considered. Again, emergent design, getting something, and if it's good, shoot, yeah, we'll implement it. If it's crap, we'll be like, yeah, thanks for your time, but we're not going to do that. So yeah, and that's it. Mhm. Okay, so you're talking about when should you start bringing in legal type of people into a production. Um, I think once you start to again to kind of get an idea of the scope of the production, once you start to have the design doc fleshed out, the technical design doc fleshed out, and you start to kind of get an understanding kind of the roadmap of where the game's going, where the resources are going to, be most needed. If the game is very movement heavy, we're going to need a lot of animators. We're going to need to get a lead animator or somebody that is going to be able to own that department. The game's, 60% of the game is that, so we got to be fair to that girl, that guy, and give them kind of a good deal or something like that. It's just not something. I mean, there's been some projects that I've gone on to where it's like, hey, we're gonna start a game. We don't know what it is, but we're gonna split it 3 ways. And that's great. I mean, that does come into play, but a lot of times there's usually one person that's bearing the brunt of everything. So I don't know if there's a magic bullet answer to that question. You just gotta kind of feel it. But I would really try and wait until you've got some documentation, you've got kind of a roadmap as to where things are going to be going, and that will start to give you a clear picture before people really start to actually get their hands dirty and start building stuff and coding and stuff and whatever. So I hope that kind of answered the question. Yeah. Uh-huh. Sure. hmm Well, there's a website. It's like a LegalZoom.com. LegalZoom.com has a lot of, you can buy $50 legal documents, and they've got a slew of them that cover a number of different types of, idiosyncrasies like that. So LegalZoom.com might be something. You might even just be able to just download kind of a boilerplate type of document and then kind of massage and do some wordsmithing that caters more towards, what your team is and do it that way, just so things are more clear and maybe more legalized. And then get it notarized, or something of that nature, something more formal. Is there a question in the back? No? Oh, there was one over here. Hang on quick. For an indie, is it a good or bad idea to release a public demo of your game? Um, when it's not too buggy to where people are going to get frustrated and you're going to get feedback to stuff you already know. Well, no, I mean, I would consider like a beta type of release or a pre-beta. There's a lot of people that once it gets to like an alpha state where it's kind of an art lock, and now you're just kind of working on code and you're polishing and you're starting to fix things. You definitely, if you're going to put stuff out there early, you want to make sure that there's a tagline that this is early, and you want to kind of already start to address these are known issues. Okay, so you're not getting a lot of the same feedback from everybody. You're trying to get other feedback, from that might be finding something that you haven't. Um, but again, a lot of times you really can't unring a bell, and if you start showing stuff too early just because you're excited or you're just desperate for feedback, it can come back and bite you. So, I would just try and release something, or at least just a small vertical slice of something that is not breaking, but just still needs some feedback or massaging because either things are too sluggish or the balance is off or whatever, and you're too close, you can't see the forest or the trees. So, yeah, now I need to go find, getting out there to the community and getting some feedback in that way, but nothing that's going to be overtly frustrating to them, to where things are really seriously breaking. A good tool or service for getting feedback? No, not really, to be quite honest with you. Other than just getting it out there to communities that I know and people that I know and trust. Um, that's pretty much how that kind of works for the most part. Jason? Okay, so you were saying to actually build feedback tools into the engine that somebody can actually just respond to, or okay, that is good. All right, I'll take two more questions and then I think we'll wrap it up and do some networking. Yeah, in the back. You. Localization, yeah, and we outsource. Yeah, we outsource for that. My German's horrible. Scheiße. That's about all I know. And sorry, mom. But yeah, we'll usually go to somebody else for something like that. All your bases are belong to us. We don't want that in our game. Well, here's kind of the best practice. So you can kind of get around the localization issue. Icons, okay, and just intuitiveness in your design. Breadcrumb people, lead them by the nose to the water if you can. Make your icons, just what they are. Very WYSIWYG. Try and stay away from text as much as you can. Now, if you're a story-based game or whatever, you're kind of hosed there, but you should at least go into it with eyes wide open, knowing that if you're going to be doing a game that's got subtitles or voiceover or whatever, yeah, you're going to come up against that localization issue. If you want to be marketable, you will. So it's counting the cost. But yeah, icons and visuals are the best way to go. One more question. Yeah. Okay. All right. The question was, what have I taken away by either a failure or success? That has really helped me and that I've been able to move on to or utilize or something like that. I understood it, so I apologize for everybody else. But I mean, for me, it was actually kind of early on in my career when I got promoted to art director at Virgin Interactive. And this was about 20 years ago. And I had a really, I loved art and I loved inspiring people and empowering, good artists to be able to become better and to really find their strengths and play to that and make them, or I shouldn't say make them, but give them the ability to create something magical that they're happy about and that they're proud of. But I had a real hard time with confrontation, in a sense that if something wasn't good enough for up to the design that I had wanted it to be, I wouldn't necessarily sit down with the artist and have them correct it while I told them. I'd take the work and I'd be like, go do something else and I'll go ahead and work on it. And I'd dress it up. My desk after a month was filled with stuff that I had taken off of people, and I was starting to notice that a lot of the artists are just becoming complacent and disenfranchised. It's like, well, why should I even do it? Mark's just going to take it away, and do it himself. And then that really spoke to me. It was a very humbling moment because I'm just like, wow, I'm not being a team member here, and I'm not empowering, my team, and I'm the director. This is what I need to do. I need to direct them to do what it is they love, what they eat, sleep, and breathe, what they're passionate about, and I'm taking that away from them. And it was some soul searching that I did, and so I turned it around and finally got to the point to where, yeah, if there was something that wasn't looking right, I gave them more resources, or I sat down with them for a couple of extra minutes, just a couple of extra minutes. It wasn't anything long, and empowered them. We had this great exchange. It built our relationship tighter. We communicated. They were confident to get head down and get going on what it is that they wanted. So that was something key, and I still remember it from all those years ago, and I still employ it now. So, great question. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks, guys. I know that was a longer meeting than we usually have. So once again, thanks to Mark and the wonderful presentation he gave. The whole thing is was live streamed. So if you guys missed anything or want to recap anything that was said tonight, you guys can see the recording that we've done, and we'll be posting that on our YouTube page and some other stuff as well. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you guys next month.